Hello and welcome to Furious Driving. Now, a lot of people when they're doing these kind of car reviews get very excited at the thought of doing a supercar, a Ferrari, a Lamborghini, something exotic and valuable. I like that kind of stuff, don't get me wrong. There's definitely a place for it and I do enjoy it. However, the thing that makes me go weak at the knees and go, oh, that looks like fun, is something far more basic. You could almost say crude. But this is a 2012 Land Rover Defender, a Defender 90. And this is what I get out of bed for. So today, this is actually one of the reviews I've been looking forward to most of all. To get out and drive a Defender, even just for a little while. It's one of life's simple pleasures. And I'm really looking forward to this one and I hope you enjoy it too. Now, if you like reviews of interesting, unusual, different vehicles, the roads less travelled by normal vehicles, if you like, then do please hit like and subscribe and check out the back catalogue of interesting reviews of other cars. I say interesting, I'm biased. But now let's crack on with this, the 2012 Defender 90. Now there's something about Land Rovers, it's hard to put your finger on it, but people who like them really, really like them. And I don't know why. Well, maybe I do know why, but I can't really put it into words though. So I've sort of grown up around Land Rovers to a certain extent in that back when I was a teenager, my dad's company had a Defender 90. I think it must have been an early 90s car that they used for towing things. And whenever the weather got bad, Dad would bring it home and we had a Defender in the drive, which is great. When I was about 16, Mum and Dad bought an old Range Rover. It was a 3-door. It was worth a fortune these days, but they paid about 1,500 quid for it. And we spent a winter, me passing spanners to my dad while he was putting, while he was fixing the gearbox on this thing. And it was one of the first cars I ever drove on my own. This vague, wandery gear stick. Since then I've owned a couple of Freelanders, I've owned a Range Rover Classic myself, and I've driven quite a lot of Defenders and Discoveries. And I always enjoy it. It's never the most refined experience, but that's not what it's about. So yeah, I have to admit a certain amount of bias towards liking these cars quite a lot. Oh, it's still snowy down here. And you could regard a car like this as the antithesis, the antidote to modern automatic, automated, touchscreen, everything kind of cars. When you get into a car and the fact it's got electric windows is a bit surprising. So let's get back to the beginning. I won't spend too much time talking about the history of Land Rovers in general because, well, we've got other videos of other cars to talk about that with at some point in the future. But it goes back to 1948, post-war export or die years. The Rover Car Company, well, they were an upmarket car company and people weren't spending big money. They had to downsize their post-war range already and drop the biggest, most luxurious cars. And the Wilkes brothers, with their farm in Wales, had an idea a bit like the American Jeep, that they could create a utilitarian farm vehicle that could be exported all around the world, around the empire and everywhere else. And it could be built simply with flat panels that were easy to press, easy to repair. They could use aluminium because there was a surplus of aluminium because Rover had been a shadow factory building aircraft during the war, and they got lots of aluminium all of a sudden, and not many planes to build. Around a simple steel chassis and a Rover engine, 4-wheel drive, and that was the Land Rover. They sketched it literally with a stick in the sand. Now they didn't call it a Series 1 back in 1948. The simple reason was it was just a Land Rover, because it was a Rover that went over the land. Makes sense really when you think about it. And they gradually improved and increased the size of and the power of the Land Rover over the next 30, 40 years. Very little in the way of change. The big shift happened in 1983 when Dylan went electric and the Land Rover went coil sprung, which was a massive, massive change. The biggest change in the history of the Land Rover. And this is where we can sort of start to call it the Defender. Land Rover didn't call it Defender until 1989, 1990, because Land Rover had been the brand and the model. They'd always been referred to by the length of the car, the 90 and the 110, and previously the 88 and the 107. But it wasn't until the Discovery arrived that they realised that, okay, they'd had the Range Rover, but that was originally called the Range Rover by Land Rover, if you look at the badges in the early 70s ones. This is fun. It's terrible, but it's fun. They had to change the name to give it a model, and Land Rover really became the brand, and the Range Rover and the Discovery and the Defender became the three separate models. And that's when the Defender happened. But since then, really, it's only been incremental updates over the many, many years in between. Now, handling. Handling is an interesting topic when it comes to a Defender because, yes, it has some handling, but, you know, when you're little and your mum said to you, you've got nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all. This could be a very short segment. With sports cars, there is the phrase, slow in, fast out. And that's a good way of holding speed through the thing, through a corner. This is more a case of slow in, slow out, because it rolls like a cross-channel ferry taking on water. If you push too fast, it will understeer, and with the off-roady tyres, potentially it will slide. It's about 97 turns lock to lock. So if you hit a fast corner or a tight bend, you are going to be wrenching this wheel, winding it like crazy to get around the corner. Steering isn't as heavy as I thought it was going to be. I've driven a few Defenders in the past and sometimes they have been very heavy indeed. This particular one is actually relatively light. What's not light though is the clutch. If you're someone who doesn't like a manual gearbox, this would put you off for life because that clutch, it's properly heavy. And the gear change is very much in the character of a classic Land Rover, in so much as it's kind of wandery and a bit rubbery, and it's in there somewhere, and it's a ½ metre long stalk, and it's on the wrong side of the car. But it is a 6-speed though, which is a handy little nod to modernity. So if you do get onto a motorway, and really you don't want to be trying to fly along, these things will do about 90 miles an hour with this particular engine. But whether you would want to be doing 90 miles an hour or not is frankly another question. Because I never mentioned the ride. The ride is a bit like being on a trampoline with a drunk spaniel. And this is a sharp corner here. This is heading to my handy little road, which I love to do my tests on. It will understeer if you push it too hard, and it doesn't really wind the lock off like a more modern car would do. The steering geometry doesn't do that for you. You've got to manually put it back on the straight and narrow, pretty much. I've many times said I love driving pre-war cars where you've really got to focus on what you're doing and think hard about how everything is going. This is a little bit like that. You have to really be mind on the job. You can't be sort of focused on too many other things because you've got to think a lot about how the car is going and what the car's doing. So you've got to be in the right gear for the corner that's approaching, the right speed for the junction that's coming up. So you have to stir the cogs, fight the pedals, wrench the wheel, and all that effort rewards you a performance 0 to 60 around 15 or 16 seconds. And with this, the most refined of all the engines, a top speed of about 90 miles an hour. And if you push it too hard, it'll push the economy down to about 20 mpg. Now, models as late as this, not only did they get the radio with a CD player and some speakers somewhere, they also had Bluetooth connectivity. And I had one of the very, very last Defenders as a press car for a week when they were finally going out of production. I loved it. I wanted to buy it off Land Rover when they defleeted it, but it was way too much money. But driving it up the motorway, I could do 70 plus miles an hour in the thing. It wasn't something you did without taking your brave pills first. And I mentioned you don't want to be distracted by too many things, and that was quite good because you couldn't hear the radio, and if anyone phoned, you definitely couldn't hear them talking, and they couldn't hear you talking either on the Bluetooth hands-free thing. So you were very, very much distraction-free when you were plugging up and down the motorway. But that's not how you drive one of these things. As Keith Adams on AR Online said, when you're doing a long journey on the motorway with one of these, you find your spot at 60, you can just about hear the radio then, and you can plod along and you get out relaxed. Now, the driving position is massively improved on these later cars. There's still no room for my right elbow, and anyone bigger than me, they basically have to open the window and put their arm out of it. At least on cars this late, they've taken the bulkhead out and put in that kind of strengthening roll bar thing, so you can move the seat back just about enough. I'm 5'11", I can just about make it in there, and the seat back does recline a little bit as well. Previously, you were sitting bolt upright, and boy was that uncomfortable. This is significantly better. Let's pull over and I'll talk you around the interior and the exterior of this rather wonderful car. So, we jump down, and that is the classic Land Rover thud when the door shuts. And take a look around the outside of this thing. Oh, it is just amazing. It's a beautiful anachronism, something that really shouldn't have been in production this long, but somehow so many people loved it, they just kept on going and going and going. And you look at the car and you can see the basic lineage that goes all the way back to 1948. That original stick-drawn sketch in the sand in Wales is here under these more modern curves. I say curves, there aren't that many curves. Some aspects of it are very traditional indeed. Others are more of a nod to, well, the modern world and the changes that have happened through its life. And looking down the side of the car, we've got these curved shoulders. It's still made of pressed flat panels of aluminium because the car is designed, or was designed, to be very, very easy to make and to repair using limited materials. It's flat panels, and these curves, these barrel sides they call it, go all the way down the full length of the Defender. And it gets aped and copied in more modern cars like the Freelander. One particularly really did lean into that design aspect to link the heritage of that car back to this car. Right up until, well, not that long before this generation went into production, you could still open these air vents just here. Your air conditioning was opening the big flap in the front of the car and getting a face full of lovely fresh air. But that flap area does mean the dashboard sits very high, and your windscreen is this little letterbox area at the top, and your wipers. And the wipers, now this will be of interest to a certain Mr. Seabrook of this parish, these are shorter than the rear screen wipers in a lot of cars. And this is your front view, your main access to the world. It's just here. That's not really changed since the 1940s. One big difference though is this bonnet bulge. When the TDCi, the Ford Duratorq engine went in, there wasn't room under the flat bonnet to fit that, so they had to add this bulge in, this power bulge, to make room for the engine underneath. At the front though, not much has really changed in a really, really long time. We've still got the Land Rover script along the front. You can see the little plinth pressed into the radiator surround, which was actually where they used to put the name of the model at one point in the 80s. Things haven't changed, and the big differences, or the big differentiation on these cars really is the colour of the plastic. You can update an older looking Defender going back 30 years by just changing it to this newer style of plastic grille and lamp surround, or putting the newer style of lamps, which are the same shape, just different colour plastic. And your deformable bumpers that are so easy to shrug off a minor impact, yeah, that's shrugging off nothing, deforming everything else. That is a solid bar of steel that is coming through, and that is attached with big sturdy bolts to the ladder chassis, the solid frame of the car. This is basically why they couldn't keep this car going any longer than they did, because the car is designed like a 1940s car, like a truck. It is a solid piece of commercial agricultural equipment, but we love them for it. On the side and the front, we've got a number of plastic vents. Some are real, some are fake. This one's only a dummy. But the one on the other side is where you would put a snorkel if you're going deep water wading of any regularity or worried about flooding. We do have the vestiges of hinges just here when you could open things along the front. Electric heated retractable mirrors, not here, no. Door handle, which is solid, chunky, big sturdy bit of plastic just there. The only concession to luxury here is the minor indent for your knuckles when you wrap around the door handle. And of course it's still got a keyhole in there. Because it is an old Austin Rover key fob, there's no guarantee it's going to work every time, so you do still want your key. This is incidentally the same key as I have on the Freelander, the Rover 200 VI, the 420 GSI, and it goes back to many previous older Rovers as well. Because this is a 90, actually 92.7 or 92.8 inches between the wheelbase, not actually 90 inches, Land Rover. It's only a two-door, technically a three-door, two doors on the side. We've not got opening windows traditionally, we've got sliding windows on the rear for the rear seat passengers. We've now got these big flared arches for the bigger wheels that have been increasing in size over time. And of course, at this point, it was only diesel array available. And of course, by this point, it was only diesel available in the Land Rover range here in the UK at any rate. You will notice this car has also got the nicer upgraded alloy wheels, which make it look a little bit more modern. Some might insist you should have steels on here, but I think these later chunky, big sturdy alloys actually look really good. The heftiness of the design really works well with the square chunkiness of the Defender overall. I love these things. Right, climbing in, and it is a long way up. This is as in a proper wollarding type effort to get into the car. There is a step if you need that kind of thing, if you're not quite tall enough to make it up there. And although this does have the luxury of carpet in it these days, it is still a rubber matted, big pedalled off-road vehicle. It's a proper farm truck basically. Right, having hauled my way up into the cabin of the Defender, let's have a proper look around this thing. It is like nothing else you have ever driven. You'll be amazed at how high the dashboard is and how you really have to kind of look over the dash to find the bonnet to look out of and see where you're going. We'll start with the door. We'll work our way from right to left. Now the door card, all plastic, basically hard wearing and wipe clean. You can see there's boot marks on there because Land Rover, and that will just be sponged off when the car gets its annual bath. No problem to worry about there at all. You can see the indent where manual windows would still be an option even as late as 2012. There's no guarantee of electric windows even this late in the car's life. This door handle will look familiar to anyone who's any familiarity with Austin Rover BL parts bin equipment. So will this plastic door pull, and so will that door lock. Answers in the comments as to all the cars that those have graced in the past before. I'm not going to tell you, I reckon you all know those answers. If you're unsure yourself, do check the comments because 1,000 other people hopefully would have told you by now. A banana to the first person who says Marina for any of those things. On the top of the dashboard, surprisingly poor T-shelf area for a car because it's been so much time being used commercially. Not a great place for your cups of tea. Here we go, a quick plug for the owner's cafe, the little old toll coffee house, and of course the pantry in Aylesford. This is a very well used example of the cup. But yeah, you can put your cups of tea and coffee. I'm actually rocking a mocha today, I was feeling really exotic. That will balance just there, just about, but not when the car's moving. Small T-shelf area just there, but only really for smaller things. Mars bars and sausage rolls will fit there quite well. We do now have a little slotty area so you can put small things to rest in there. A phone holder's been added just to that one. The car really does play to its crudity as a strength. They make a feature of it so you can still see the star top screws that hold the dashboard together. They could have done something to hide that, but they really lent into it and made it a thing that you can see this stuff, which is, I kind of really like that. Got tweeters at the top, which is an unusual thing to find in this car, because a radio, again, not necessarily guaranteed. We do now have air conditioning. This is when things got to the height of luxury. You have air conditioning, which admittedly on a Land Rover isn't the best. It's a little like opening the fridge door and then wafting it. But you know, it's there. And we've got our analog clock just there. God, where's the day gone? And moving down, we do have big buttons. These are designed so that if you've got big gloves on in the wintertime, you can push these buttons without any kind of problem. American car style. And this car, as I say, has got electric windows. Exciting times. Same switches as you'll find in the Freelander. These are actually the sunroof and rear window drop glass buttons in the Freelander. Are they the same as an SD1? I need to go and have a look at that. And the radio, you'll notice, although it is Land Rover branded CD player, it is a singled in radio. There is no kind of integrated all-in-one touchscreen yada yada malarkey here. This is as good as it gets, and you consider this luxury. Well, ignore the fact you can barely hear the radio over the engine if you go more than 40 miles an hour. You've got a radio, make the most of it. And it's the nice kind of simple 2 dials and a couple of sliders kind of aircon that we like. More exposed screw heads, lovely. Got headlight levelling here on the passenger side next to the heated seat switches because, well, of course you would. Why wouldn't you? And the thing you'll notice about all of these controls is how high up they are on the dashboard. And that's not by accident. That's not designed so that you can see them easily or reach them easily, because no consideration was given to that whatsoever. If you look at the arrangement of these things, it's kind of like they had a bag of switches they had to fit somewhere in the car, and they just put them in a bucket and threw them at the dashboard, and wherever they landed, they went with it. But the reason they're this high is because if the car goes through really, really deep water, everything electronic is above knee level, even when you're sitting in here, which is like a metre above the ground. Let's be honest, those door seals, they barely keep the rain out, so going through a river, no chance. Everything under this level can get wet. Everything below this point can get soaked and it won't matter. It'll dry out eventually. It'll smell, but it'll dry. Everything up here, that should hopefully stay dry. If it's deeper than that, then you've got other problems to worry about. Now coming back here, we do have 2 very exciting things. First of all, 6-speed manual gearbox, which is cool. Admittedly, it's been positioned so the passenger can use it rather than the driver. Next to it, the stubby gear shift, and this is quite exciting, and there's a couple of important labels explaining how you use these things. These are your high and low ratio gearboxes and your diff lock. And this is kind of what separates the Defender from all but the most hardcore, serious off-roading vehicles out there. The fact we've got the diff locks and we've got the high and low ratios means that this car is borderline unstoppable. It may not be comfortable, it may not be fast, it may not be refined, but if you need to get somewhere, it's going to get there. Like the sticker that You've Better Buy said, you can go fast, I can go anywhere. And that's not an idle boast, that is pretty much a fact. As long as you've got the right tyres in this thing, it'll pretty much go over anything. Might go quickly, but it'll go there. Now moving back to the dashboard, we've now got silver rings around the rev counter, the fuel and temperature gauges and the speedometer. And we've even got little LCD things which probably tell us stuff. And we've got more exposed screw heads, but we do have a little tiny cubby hole there, sub T-shelf down there. Moving back to the steering wheel. Now, you might have airbags in your car for your knees, for your shoulders, for your head, for everything else. This car though has got a slightly padded, very slightly padded, softish area in the middle of the large, almost deformable steering wheel, which is as close to safety as anyone can really want, unless they're being very, very spoilt indeed, quite frankly. And behind that, we've got some of the longest serving switches I've ever seen. I think these switches first appeared in the 1980 Metro. So we've got our impromptu horn test. That is a long-lived and well-loved PARP. Indicators and main beams next to that one. A tip and side light switch behind that, and we've got our wipers just here. All exciting stuff. Looking through the steering wheel, we've got our pedals, which are huge and heavy, and we've got our handbrake positioned where you can almost reach it. Now, you can have this as a 3-seater setup, so we've got 2 seats in the front of this car and you can walk through to the back. But you can have this as a 3-seater. You can have a driver's seat and a separate 2-person bench, so 3 people up front. So it turns it into a 5-seater. But in this one, though, we have got the storage area, which is being used for storage, and the double cup holder, which is super handy. And on the left hand side, instead of a glove box, we've got a glove area and a grab handle, an FM handle, as many off-roaders like to call it. Above us we have got a ceiling, which is good, and a light, which looks like the same one as my Rover Tomcat from 1993. Heading around the back of the Defender, we have got the side opening door, which has of course got the big spare wheel hanging on the door itself, which frees up more space inside. We do have a heated rear window, which is nice, and little portal windows or porthole windows on the side. The rear wiper actually looks either the same size or bigger than the one on the front. But reach around slightly awkwardly to get to the door handle. That opens. I love this shade of blue on this car. So cool. And we have got the full practicality of expecting people to be in the back of the Defender. So we've got a door handle on the inside and we've got a pull handle as well. Typically Defender, we have got everything very, very exposed. It's really kind of chunky, heavy duty rear screen heated. We've got the tow bar, we've got another step to get up, and we've got, humorously, the big exhaust with the cutout through the mud flap in order to let the exhaust go past it. And we have the various holes and things in the chassis because, going back to the legacy of the years, the other things that could have been attached to the car and probably still could be attached if it was a working vehicle. Now step up inside and you'll notice, well, a couple of things in fact. First of all, we've got the little side top windows, which everyone loves, these little skylight things. This is one of the favourite things that people find in the back of a Land Rover. And to the side though, you'll see we have got 2 seats, but they are folded up out of the way, so you can actually access and use the car as basically a van when you don't have passengers. But when you do have passengers, pull the handle, down comes the seat, pull the lever. We now have a rear seat. With all latched in place, we now have a rear seat. Previously, these were side benches, and you could have basically a 7-seater in a Defender 90 because you could have 2 people on either side. But in terms of accident safety, that's pretty woeful. So it got changed to be these fold-down seats. They're actually surprisingly comfortable for a fold-down, squeeze-up seat. And in terms of comfort, we've got speakers. You do not have cup holders. You don't have power sources. You do have a thing for putting stuff in. And you've got lash-down points. You also have a huge metal bar. Oh, and hilariously, you know how with modern cars, you basically just push one little tiny button in the boot and everything just kind of magically appears or disappears. With this one, having folded the seat back down again, and you've got a big Land Rover logo on the back of it, to fold it down, you pull this lever just here. Push it up again, you pull this lever just here. It's not even the same levers, but you do at least have 3-point harnesses though. Okay, fun fact, the ignition key is on the left-hand side of the steering column, and if you've got the lights switched on, you can't turn the key. And it chugs into life. But despite the terrible ergonomics, the woeful handling, the poor performance, the fact it's quite loud and rattly, Land Rover were actually quite proud of the fact in this later TDCi model they fitted some sound deadening. It's meant to be quite quiet. It's actually one of the most fun things you can ever get behind the wheel of and drive. I love the chugging engine. It's a transit engine, and you're sitting up here and you're basically as high as a transit driver. You're looking down on the world, but not with that kind of smug Range Rover command driving position thing. This is a yeah kind of, I'm going to go and explore something. Which way to the Darien Gap? I want to go and drive across that right now. Find me a mountain or a river. This thing is just incredible. It's go anywhere, do anything, practical, no nonsense. Normally when I do a car review, the owner says, do you want me to clean the car? And I'm like, yeah, get the thing as sparkly as we can. Let's show it off at its best. This car is typical Land Rover. It's got muddy rubber floor mats, grimy windows, but it looks 100% in its element. This is kind of like Hippo the Freelander, which is very much a soft roader compared to this thing. But this is just so much fun. I love it. And the thing that finally killed it was the world around it. The car started in 1948 at a continuous production run of 67 years of, you know, the Series 1, 2, 3, the coil sprung, the Defender, right up until, well, they just couldn't make it work any longer. Regulations, safety, pedestrian safety, driver safety, emissions, all finally caught up with it. When the coil sprungs came out, they initially had the 200 TDI engine, which was a favourite, and then it got bumped up to the 300 TDI, which is the one that Land Rover aficionados still rave about. They love that engine. Then there was the TD5 engine, the 5-cylinder turbo diesel, which I think is 1994, memory. A lot of people do think that is actually a BMW engine or brought in, but no, it was in development by Rover before BMW got involved. It's definitely smoother, more powerful at higher rev ranges, but lacks torque lower down compared to the 300 TDI. And a lot of people who do towing and off-roading weren't such a fan of that one. Anyway, emissions got the better of that, so that was replaced when Ford took over by the 2.4 TDCi Duratorq, which was a good engine. A lot of people who are fans of the Duratorq era really like that and rate it because it's not got the same levels of exhaust and filtration and things as the later engines, which makes it easier to run, easier to live with. The final incarnation, which was and in order to catch up with the Euro emissions requirements, was this, the 2.2D TDCi Duratorq, which was the same power as the 2.4, but better emissions and better economy. And because of that, you pay about 200 quid a year less in road tax for this particular engine over the 2.4. So kind of a no-brainer in that respect, although a lot of people who do their own maintenance do prefer running a 2.4 just for ease of maintenance. Now when the replacement Defender came out, the new automatic-only vast leviathan of a vehicle, there was a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth because it was so very, very different to this, the real Defender. And it is just not the same animal at all. As I say, automatic only, and automatic wasn't even an option on this thing. That's now hybrid and petrol and diesel hybrid. This thing is manual only, diesel only, a world away. So values of these things are just held on and on and on. People just keep on driving them and wanting them because there's nothing else like it. And of course they were so very adaptable. This is the 90, which is the small, compact, usable one. It looks big and chunky, but compared to the new one, it's absolutely tiny. Of course, the next one up was the 110, which is a 4-door, 5-door version with a row of rear seats. Then of course you had the 130 on the extended chassis, which was originally developed for the army, but then because you could buy a Land Rover as a truck cab and have bare back end, that was really popular with all kinds of different industries. You can have all of the Defenders as a car like this, as a pickup truck, as a box van, as a flatbed, just endless options. And of course that's before you start adding your own aftermarket customizations to them. All the turns. This is a lovely torquey engine. You can virtually drive it on the torque. It's fantastic. And people often ask where I find my cars for reviews. Sometimes I turn up on email, sometimes I find them online. This one I found through my favourite coffee shop. If you go to the little old toll house in Allington or the pantry in Aylesford, the owner of their coffee shop, this is her car. And then it's in fact the dog paraphernalia and of course the coffee cup with her logo on it. So thank you very much indeed for the loan of the car. I can definitely recommend the coffee, that's really nice. And she's half a mind to sell this car. She's had it quite a while. And if you're interested, then drop me a line and I'll put you in touch. She's only thinking about it, but if someone makes a serious offer, I think she'd be persuaded. And I'll be honest, after a couple of minutes at the wheel, I'm quite tempted myself. So thank you for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed this ride out in this absolutely magnificent 2012 Defender 90 2.2 TDCi Duratorq. I have loved it, and as always I've loved being in a Defender. If you've enjoyed this, please as always hit like and subscribe and join us again next time driving something completely different.